I have never met or observed a successful person with longevity who's had the type of success that I desire and work towards having, who hasn't hustled.
And then you start to rely on things that are not of God to get you through.
Your checklist isn't just a checklist. I think it's a regression.
A stage. Yeah.
I think
absolutely.
That's the last stage where you're like, actually, this has become toxic and unhealthy, and I'm now
using something as a crutch, and that can look like anything.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Life on God's Terms podcast. We are so thrilled that you decided to join us today. I am your host, Rachel Riva, and I am so happy to have my sister co-host, my sisters in life, by blood, in crime, in faith. Thanks for coming back, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure, of course. Where else am I going to be?
Where else are we going to be? We kind of hang out anyway. The difference is now we're just putting mics on.
Yes.
Dangerous, but yes.
Dangerous. We've been saying this for years. It would be very dangerous if we turned microphones on during our conversations. But here we are.
We're here.
We are. And actually, we should just jump into the topic for today, which is one that is really close to my heart. The theme is hustle, but it's a very specific direction, because I've been hearing a lot of chatter online and in conversations about the hustle. Now, I wrote a book about hustle, Great Grace and Hustle. But there's also been a lot of negativity around this word, and I really wanted us to explore, especially for ambitious, driven people who have goals. I have goals. You guys have goals. I know there's a lot of our listeners, whether it's in business or your career or even on personal goals. And sometimes we get not stuck, but it's like, how do we hustle God's way without burning out? And so I think there's a lot of, how to do business God's way or how to parent God's way or whatever. But it's like, how do we hustle and do what we need to do and build what we were called to build? But how do we do it God's way and not burning ourselves out? So that's kind of a conversation I know we've been having a lot lately, haven't we?
Yes.
100%.
Firstly, I've got a couple of questions here. But the first thing I want to say is, going back to my point before, the word hustle, it was really popular for a while, hustle and grind and hustle in the mornings. And then something else kind of came out, and I don't know, it was like this real negativity towards the word of you can't, hustle's a bad thing and we shouldn't be promoting it. It's really negative. It's leading to burnout. It's leading to toxic productivity. It's leading to people overworking. And I do think there's an element of that. But I guess the first question is hustle a bad thing? I would love to open up the floor here. What do we think?
I don't think it is a bad thing. I think even the word hustle itself isn't a bad thing. I think people have burnt themselves out so much that they're relating the word to an emotion, which is burnout. So they're calling it a bad word when really I don't think it is. I like the word hustle. The dictionary, if you look it up, what it says is what it is. And I think we all have seasons of hustle. So I think it's important to call it what it is. And yeah, I don't think it's a bad word, but that's just me. Wendy, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm definitely in the same vein of hustle isn't meant to be forever. It's definitely a season. I mean, of course, if you stayed in that moment of hustle, you would 100% burn out. I've experienced it. But yeah, it's not meant to be forever. It is definitely a business season of whether you're growing your business or you're expanding. And you know what? That's not even just in business. That's also in life. That's in if you're studying and growing in so many different ways. There's a reason, even biblically, why they talk about the seasons. So yeah, it's 100% not a bad thing. And I almost I feel like we should kind of reclaim the word back.
Yeah.
That if it's a good thing, but there needs to be real context to what it is.
Gary Vee, who's a pretty popular, business guy.
He's cool.
Cool. He's cool because he talks a lot about, success and marketing. He said he stopped using the word hustle in his marketing because he said there was such negativity surrounding it. The thing that I want to say is this: I have never met or observed a successful person with longevity who's had the type of success that I desire and work towards having, who hasn't hustled. I have never met that person.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, and like you said, I think it's important to say this is for a season. When I was building my career, I worked very hard. And then when I started a business, it was a very different type of hustle, but really required that. Parenting requires hustling, building a house, keeping a home, all of that. But it's not a bad thing. And I think the Bible talks about working hard and, what a lazy man does. And it really promotes and encourages people who work hard and, plows the field and all that type of thing. So yeah, like you said, I'd love to reclaim that word because it's not a bad thing. I think the connotation is people just don't want to burn out, which leads us to the next thing. How do you know you are on your way to burnout?
Well, you've got to look out for the signs. There's always signs that come up for everyone, which is very personal and looks very different. But you know the signs when they come up. And I think you just have to ask yourself a lot of check-in questions like, what's the goal of the task that you're on? What's the ultimate goal? And is there a deadline to that? Even asking yourself, are you trying to please your boss more than your God?
I think
that's
a really powerful question to ask because we hear a lot about people pleasing and man pleasing. Are you pleasing man? Are you pleasing God? And it sounds like, of course, I don't want to please man. Yes, you do. We all do. I fall into that constantly, whether it's colleagues, clients, boss, even my own family and friends. It's like I want to do right. I always want to do right by people. But when we get to a place where we're just constantly showing up for other people's agendas in a way, versus what God has called us to in that time, that can be a really tough thing to identify.
Absolutely. But again, there's always signs, and when you're going towards, that burnout. You just do. So I've even done a little checklist of signs to look out for.
Leslie has a checklist. Please tell us your sign.
Okay, well, there's 8.
Okay. Oh,
so,
okay.
Wow. Be ready.
Let's go. Let's get our pens ready.
It.
Yes.
So the first one is, are you neglecting your own needs more often? So obviously first season, you need to, get in, work more than you normally would, but does that overflow into a longer time period? So I thought that was a big one. Number 2 was, are you changing your values and focusing more on work? So changing your values is, usually I spend time with family at this time. But I need to work late to finish that. Are you pushing your values? Are you not reading your Bible? Are you not going to your Bible studies? Are you, going for a walk with your wife or your kids or your husband or whatever? So pushing your values just to get the work done. Is a big one. 3 is denying the problems that arise due to work stress and just putting it back on yourself of, no, I just need to work harder. I need to get more sleep. No, it's on me. It's not the workload. And I think everyone can relate to denying. I don't know. Can they? Is it just me?
I think it's not putting, like you said, it's putting it back on yourself of, I just need to manage that better.
Yes.
And it's sometimes not managing it better. It's, I should have said no 3 weeks ago to that, or I should have extended the deadline then.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I've struggled the most with, which is, of course I can. Doesn't mean you should.
That's
just
right.
because you can doesn't mean you should. And
That's
you're
right.
constantly, and it's not a bad thing. I can get a lot done. I am highly productive. But if I'm constantly leaving that switch on for myself, it can spiral, and it's not always healthy. So yeah.
True. Number 4 is withdrawal from social life and your family as well. So if you find yourself withdrawing more from those things that give you life, that's a big red flag.
So things that give you life, such as for me, it would be running and riding. Those are what?
Nothing.
Oh, why? Because I haven't run recently.
Well, when was the last
A month
time?
ago.
Maybe that's a red flag.
Maybe. Yes, I've tried to start running again. It's been a very long process to get there.
Wendy, do you have anything?
Oh my gosh.
I know when my kitchen and garden aren't in order, that's kind of a very visual flag that I've hit overwhelm and I've surpassed my own capacity. And when my kitchen and garden are out of order, and it's almost like God letting me know, hey, you need to step back, reevaluate, and start tracking time in a much better way than what you're doing.
I love that.
Yeah,
I can definitely relate to the kitchen sink or even our the bedroom kind of thing of going, hold on, this doesn't feel good anymore. When I'm collapsing into my bed and I haven't nourished that space or, taking care of that space. Yeah, it doesn't feel good. You're absolutely right. I really love that. Our stepdad, Mark, he has been cycling for years now.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've noticed is sometimes if we have a busy season and I, go, oh, could you maybe come and help us with Michael or something if I'm away? And he goes, I can do it, but I can't do it these days because I cycle those mornings. And I love that he really protects that time because he needs it. It's really important for him physically, mentally, and all the things. And I'm like, that's such a good representation of just, I'll be there for you, but this is sacred, this is a really important thing. And I think we're not always great at doing that.
No.
It's really easy to go, oh, look, I usually do this at that times and I'd rather not, exercise than anything. But there is something about putting a circle around those
boundaries.
Areas. Yes.
Putting those boundaries up.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
All right, next one, your number 5, your behavior changes, which upsets your family and close loved ones.
Or they notice.
And they point it out in a loving way.
Do share more, Leslie.
I think that's enough.
I think I'd love to hear some examples. That's really hard though, isn't it? And it's hard if you don't have the awareness first too.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Number 6, depersonalization. It happens when you don't feel like yourself and you don't know what you like anymore.
Oh, like that scene in Runaway Bride when they're like, how do you like your eggs?
Oh my gosh.
She's like, I like it like that. And he's like, do you? And I always thought that was so, as a kid, I was like, this is ridiculous. But then she went on this whole thing of actually, I don't know how I like my eggs. Anyway, I thought that was really interesting.
Because she always had her eggs how the fiance had it. That's so true.
Anyway.
Number 7.
Yes.
Feeling empty or numb. And then you start to rely on things that are not of God to get you through.
That's deep.
It is. It is. Well, this is getting into like the hard parts of it. This is when like you're really very close to complete burnout.
Your checklist isn't just a checklist. I think it's a regression.
A stage. Yeah.
I think that's the last stage where you're like, actually, this has become toxic and unhealthy, and I'm now
using something as a crutch, and that can look like anything.
Yeah, that's right.
For
anything.
Sure.
Yeah, which we all have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, and the last one, which is number 8, I put depression, lost, and completely exhausted.
All from just not managing or not recognizing when to say no, or not having those boundaries.
And not having enough self-care for yourself, loving yourself enough to go, hey, no, I recognize in myself that if I keep going this way, it's not going to turn out good. And then I won't be able to help anyone.
That's right.
It's like that
quote, you cannot pour from an empty cup.
That's exactly right.
It's so true.
I think there's a confidence piece here as well, particularly when it comes to work and business. I've noticed that in myself. I don't want to say I can't handle it. I don't want to say it's too much.
Yes.
I don't want to say I need to take a step back.
Maybe it's a pride because you're trying to prove yourself over and over.
I mean, it can be people pleasing. It can be pride. I think we all have our own roots. Yeah.
It could be both.
But that's a struggle for me because I want to prove I can do it, and I want to tick all those boxes. It feels really good. But Wendy was saying something the other day of how unhealthy that can become because you can become addicted to it in a sense.
And then you lose your identity.
Yeah, because it becomes everything about this one part of my life.
And then that's not God at all.
Well, it's about our identity. Our identity should be through Christ, not through our job, but He actually seeds those things in us. He gives us those desires to want and those big things, whatever they are for people. I'm 45 and I'm still, I almost want to say day by day, still learning that. There are parts, really missed the fruit on that one today. And but I'm just being honest. Yeah.
We can all relate to that though. And I think I wanted to say something about that. One of the questions we have here is self-care selfish? And I think we kind of answered that of it's not. And one of the things is servanthood must be balanced with self-care. So we have listeners here who maybe they volunteer at their church or they're very involved in volunteering and helping. And we grew up in a family that really was hugely involved in ministries and church and giving. And I've observed, and it's happened to me sometimes, you want to give, you want to show up. How do we balance that? And how do you have boundaries around that? Because I think that's something that people don't always do well, including myself.
It's a tough one because, we're called to serve, but I also feel that we're called to still be part of our family life. And when you're robbing your family of
Your best.
of your best, it's I kind of feel, and I will say we didn't grow up definitely this way, that it should be God, family, church, and service.
Yeah.
And ours was definitely not that way.
Yeah.
There would be times, I guess without speaking too much, that we would be involved in a church XYZ nearly every day of the week.
Yeah.
And that both our parents worked full-time, multiple jobs at times, and we still were in school and we were trucked to Kingdom Come, but balance and harmony were not there. Respect was there. Them wanting to do God's best was always in the forefront.
And love.
So much love. We had such a loving household, and I'm so grateful for that. But there was not harmony and balance there. But there was deep love. So thanks for throwing that in, Leslie.
For me, I think it's, are you at peace? And I think once you start losing that peace, that's when you need to start to ask yourself those check-in questions.
I think for us, because we have a 5-year-old now, and it's really important for him to be involved in a church and aware of all that, because we grew up with that. But the question has always been in my mind of how do I do this without, like you said, sacrificing family time, essentially, and having a clear schedule that everyone's getting enough rest and we're not feeling rushed all the time. That's one thing I really want to avoid. I don't always do it great. We were rushing this morning, but I really try and create a schedule that allows for family time is probably our main thing. The one thing I'm doing right now, and I don't know if we'll always continue this, but I made a commitment that we don't do church on Sunday nights. We just don't do it. Only because Sunday nights they're actually really good family nights for us, and we really prepare the week ahead. And I didn't want to tell people about that because I felt like I was almost like, oh, I'm doing this. But we do church on Sunday mornings, and do that. And then we do our family time afterwards. But it's actually worked well for us. And I'm not saying it will always be the case. That's a boundary. But that's one thing that has been a really clear just a clear boundary I decided one day, and because I recognized when we tried to do anything after a certain time on Sundays, it just didn't do well for our family. So those were, I like tangibles like that, but I don't know if it will always be the case. But I think everyone has to make the decision according to their family and their priorities and what God has called you to at the time. I volunteer once a month. Right now, I don't feel I have more capacity to do that, anything other than that. So and it's easy to I compare myself. Like you see other people going, they do it constantly. I'm like, that's great for them and thank God for them. But this is what I feel I can do right now, and to just own that and not be apologizing for it, and just go, this is how I know I can show up best for my family right now. And that's the only way I know to make that decision.
That's good.
That's a good one.
For now it is. And it was, do you know how I feel comfortable sharing it? One of the volunteers who has grown children, and we were chatting, and she said, oh, no, we don't do church on Sunday nights. I said, she goes, oh, I told everyone it does not work for us and I just went, oh my gosh, basically. And she was just totally unapologetic about it.
She gave you permission.
She gave me permission.
She gave you permission
because
to
I had it in
that.
my head, but I never said it to people. I just said, oh, no, we won't be there. I just but when she said it, she said, no, that's not going to work for us. My husband gets up at this time and we do this. And it used to stress us out all the time. And I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I guess what I'm trying to say is, going back to your point, is we do not have to live in stress.
No.
And so
follow the peace.
Follow the peace. What can you take out of your life to allow that family time to grow, or that peace to grow, or so you can actually focus on those things. So those are a few things that have helped me at the moment.
And we're all human. Like, I think it's good just to test some things out and see what works for you and your family.
Yeah. So I guess then the last question is, when we've touched on it a bit, I know I've chatted, what strategies have helped introduce balance to your schedule or energy?
Well, I would just say we did this with one of your, I shouldn't say a few of the clients a while ago, and I thought it was so helpful. And I've started to do it for myself, and it was tracking all of my time. Yeah. And I mean all of my time, every minute of every day. Not only do I do it for work, I do it for home, and I've started doing it recently. And it was mind-blowing where my mind, that was also equally as mind-blowing, frankly, but where my time was going, and it was really telling. But I would just say that's definitely one of the strategies I use. We've even much to my daughter's dismay, gotten rid of some of the streaming services. I said, I'm not saying forever. I'm just saying I want to be more intentional with our time. I look at lovely, amazing, successful people, and that's one of the things they all say. You have to almost do a time audit on yourself and be really clear about where you spend your time. And that also includes, our faith. I know we have our prayer calls in the mornings, but how much time do you really spend in the Bible? How much time do you really spend on, topping yourself up with other things too?
That's awesome. That's really helpful. What about you, Les?
I think the biggest thing was definitely what Wendy was saying, like being intentional with your time. And when someone would ask me to do something, instead of saying yes straight away, which was a really bad habit, I used to just say, you know what, leave it with me and I'll get back to you about that. Because it was giving me time. It just, put a pause on it. It gave me time to look at my schedule, look at what I actually did have on. Could I fit that in with their time frame? And if I couldn't, I would just go back to them and just say, look, I'm so terribly sorry. You're going to have to get someone else to do that. I can't fit that in with that time frame.
So many of those requests people used to just come to my desk and verbally go, can you do this? And I'd say, oh, can you just put that in an email for me? Because if I verbally agreed to this now, which I would just do, and then you realize, not that it's whatever, they've got their own agenda, everyone does, but just, give yourself time to pause.
That's right.
And that's really hard, isn't
Respect
it?
your time.
Respect your time.
If you don't protect your time, though, things get blown out.
People steal it without meaning to, but everyone's agendas are...
That's right. They don't know how busy you are.
Right. And they've actually, when you start doing that, people value your time more.
So much more.
When you start valuing your own time. Yeah. It's a weird
They might be shocked at first.
100%. Yeah.
You're saying no.
You're saying no to me?
You're busy?
But it's a really... It shocks me sometimes, more in a social capacity than in a work capacity. You're like, oh, that's great. But it's showing people what your values are, what you respect. You're like, oh, I really can't get to that, for however long. I was listening to a podcast before, Ed Milet. As you guys know, I listen to a lot of his content.
We love Ed.
And it was him and Brendan Burchard. And they're some of the top in the self-development field and top business owners as well. And they were saying one of the biggest things they do is they only check their emails like 9 to 10 and 4 to 5.
Yeah, that's right.
They have no notifications between that time.
Yes.
And they said, we just don't do it. And there are stats about, they say, every time you get interrupted, whether it's a notification or someone coming to your desk, it takes you mentally 20 minutes to get back onto a task. So I'll tell you guys a story. This has been embarrassing. I was working in this role and all of our desks, it was all open plan. So people would just come in and talk to us all the time. And I found it very disruptive. And I had these stats.
I know where
you
you're
remember
going.
This? Okay.
I remember this story.
It's not great, but it just shows because I was like,
girl, you got boundaries.
I had boundaries. So people just kept coming up and having chats to me, and just because we were there, we were just always there, and we were like this in this like thoroughfare. And I mentioned it to my manager once, and he was like, "Oh well, that's unfortunate. People like to chat." That was literally his, and I thought, I have to take this into my own hands. And so I created a sign and I put it up behind me. And the sign said, if I have headphones on, and I got those big Boss like top, big earphones, please do not interrupt me, but send me an email. That's what I said. It was a big sign on the back. And I said, unless there's a bear attack, and then you can interrupt me. That was it. That caused more conversations and interruptions. It was the bear part. I knew I wanted to add humor in because I'm like, I'm not a jerk. I'm lovely. And like a month later, my manager was like, "Can we talk about this now?" And I'm like, "What is the problem?" I showed him the study.
And you didn't have your headphones on all the time.
No.
You would have it during certain.
I did when I was
busy
working
moments.
I didn't have them on all the time. I wasn't. I enjoyed a chat, but it was really me kind of going, I don't know how else to do this to get my time back. In an open plan. So I started booking out other meeting rooms to go to get time out. I found that more useful than a bear sign behind me. I will say this from a more practical perspective. I put a social media timer on my phone for my apps, which I really never thought I needed it, but I actually found literally by 9:30 my phone was unusable. I was like, what? I could only call people now? Because it was true. It was eating up so much of my scroll time. I had no idea.
So you're living like people in the late 90s?
It was really upsetting.
That's cool, Rachel.
No,
that's awesome.
it's good though. That was me
Helpful
putting a
with
boundary.
time,
And actually, I found I was less stressed, a little bit more creative, definitely more present with my family. So just little things
Did you
like
sleep
that.
better?
Definitely. And I've taken, I didn't do this last night, but I've brought an old school alarm clock back. You gave it to me, didn't you?
I did. It's a Seiko.
She gave me a Seiko alarm clock, which is, they're still going after all these years. And so I've gone back to the old school alarm clock, and my phone now sleeps in the hallway. It's not in my bedroom beside me.
That is awesome.
But I was recognizing, and we know the screen at night is not good for you, but just the phone, it's the apps and the phone and the scrolling that was really not great for me in terms of winding down. So those things have been helpful to me. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. Thanks for the shares, ladies. We hope this has been helpful for you today. We would love to hear from you. Please comment or reach out to us at Life on Her Terms Media on social and all the socials. And hope that you've been encouraged today and hope to see you again soon. Many thanks. God bless.